Hello, welcome to the 100th episode of Catholic ReCon Testimonies from Reverts and Converts. I'm your host, Eddie Trask. And this week's guest is Megan Mastro, who I found out about through a good friend, CV, who runs a YouTube channel called The Reconverted Catholic. I invite you to go check out his videos and the work that he's done and the guests that he has had on his show when you get a chance. Megan, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for being willing, like so many people, willing to share your story.
Yeah, thank you. It's exciting that it's the 100th episode. So.
Yeah, it's one of those things where even across the first 50 episodes, the number of different paths. I mean, this is how I view it. Some people might say, oh, they're all kind of the same, but I can see the diversity, and you can see what the Lord is doing, and no two journeys are the same, and the emotions tied to the journeys is quite remarkable. If you would take us back in time to when this all started, your personal journey.
Yeah, okay. So I was baptized Catholic, but after I made my confirmation when I was 15, I just never had any interest in remaining Catholic. So I think that was partially due to just the parish that I grew up in. I guess just in being poorly formed in the faith, which I think happens to a lot of people, but unfortunately. But I was in a public school, and it was just not a good environment for a young girl, I don't think. And I stand by that now. But so I was exposed to a lot of just I knew that the boys that I was going to school with were watching porn at like 13, and just exposed to a lot of all of the sexual, like, explicit things going on, and that impacted the girls. So yeah, I was getting sexually involved at a young age, and then I ended up getting pregnant at 16 with my boyfriend, who I was in love with. And at the time, I thought I wanted to marry him because it was all of that fantasy that young girls have. And I think just being naive as well. But yeah, so I ended up getting an abortion at 16. And after that, I just really never had any interest in the Catholic Church, because there was the, I guess, the rumor, I guess, or the myth that the Catholic Church, like, if you had an abortion, then you're out, and that the church really wants nothing to do with you. So yeah, I think I felt like a rejection by the church that I came up with in my own head. So then I rejected the church.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really rejected spirituality. I mean, I was just sucked into secularism. That was my life. And then when I started my master's program, I realized that I was anxious all the time, and I was miserable. And this was also the time when New Age started to kind of rise on social media in popularity. So, like, buying crystals and getting into tarot cards, and more so just like manifesting and saying affirmations. So
What
I would,
I ask? What is the allure of all of that? Everyone has it seems everyone has a slightly different answer. What is that? What are they appealing to?
yeah, I think for a lot of people, they're appealing to the idea that you can control your destiny,
Okay.
that you can manifest whatever you want. If you want 3 cars and a husband and children and two houses, you can manifest it, and you can manifest your dream job, and you can download spell books and you can cast love spells to get the person you want. Yeah, so I think it's all about control. Yeah, and it's attachment to the world, I think, as well, because but then I say that, but then I think about how a lot of it is also about enlightenment. And that's when that's but that's like, I would say, a different side of New Age, because there's the material side, where people just want to have peace and like trust that everything is going to work out and that the universe is on their side and in their favor. Um, so there's that element. And then I think another appeal to it is how like dreamy it all looks from the outside. Like girls who are influencers on Instagram, who are like yoga girls and just all natural, and their aesthetic is just, they have a really nice aesthetic. So there's appeal to that, because it's like, I want that calm, I want that peace. And yeah, I don't want to be afraid of the future. That was my thing. So yeah, I started getting into that, just like dabbling in it. I ended up just spending like $300 on crystals one day, and I didn't have the money to be doing that. So that's another thing that happens, is that it's a lucrative business. So people who are in New Age and the influencers, like they come off as if they're trying to help other people to like become enlightened and in touch with nature and all of that. But they're making a lot of money off people selling lies, unfortunately. So yeah. But the other side of New Age is the Buddhism side, and just striving for enlightenment and like spending a lot of time in meditation. And it's all about connecting with the realms, the spiritual realms, um, and spirits specifically. Because if you can connect with spirits, then they can give you information that you want. So there's some Gnosticism in there. And what's scary is that it's real. Like it's demonic, but unfortunately, like that is the reality. And a lot of people don't realize that. So some people will brush off New Age and just say like, oh, that's just a bunch of like fake, like psychics are fake, everything is just made up.
Yeah.
But the truth is that it's not, that there are real like encounters happening, and they're not of God.
So when people are meditating, they're getting guided, I'm assuming, through books and different things. Here's a kind of a roadmap to how you can ascend, in a sense. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah.
And if you ascend, you will ultimately get more of those downloads that you desire so desperately.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and it almost forms like an addiction or a high from it. So that is kind of what happened to me. Was I was seeking like to advance in whatever. I didn't even know what I was seeking, but essentially, when I was in my master's program, I started going to psychics. And one time I went to a psychic, and they told me that I could become a psychic too. And I was just really, honestly, I was upset about that, because I felt like during that psychic session, I was seeking information and they weren't giving me any information. He was just telling me, no, you have to learn how to do this yourself. And I was just very frustrated by that. But I took it seriously after. So that was my mission then. I wanted to like become intuitive, is the word, to have clairvoyance. And I wanted to develop clairvoyance, which is like being able to see and claircognizance, and then there's another one too, clairaudient, I think, to be able to hear things.
Wow, I've never heard that term, clairaudient.
Yeah, yeah. So it's all about like how you receive insights from these realms and these spirits. So the reason that propelled me into it was because I went through a bad breakup, and I was dating an atheist, and this was now after I started my PhD program in Phoenix. So I started dating this atheist, and he was actually a nihilist. So he believed that when you die, you just go into the earth and that's it. And there's nothing after. So he was really smart because he was into science, as most nihilists are. And I then believed that that was the truth, because yeah, I was pulled to sticking to whatever was true. I was big on like just not being fooled, and there was probably some pride in there, but I just didn't. I wanted the truth, and I thought that like atheism or nihilism was the truth. So then when we broke up, um, I realized that I had been lying to myself, and that I didn't believe that there was nothing, and that I knew that there was something spiritual because I had encounters before. So with God and with like spirits not of God. So because I feel like throughout my whole time, like just all of my teenage years, there was just a lot of darkness, and God and Jesus like was just showing up throughout, just little seedlings, you know. So I always believed in the resurrection, but it just gets so twisted in there, just like, you know, the father of lies.
Yeah.
Um,
So from the time or even leading up to the abortion and then all the way to the PhD program, were you at mass at any point?
yeah, so my family was still attending mass, but we were always lukewarm Catholics. So we would definitely go on Christmas and Easter, and my brother and my mom would go sometimes together throughout the year. Um, but otherwise it was just Christmas and Easter.
Did you, so if there was a period where you're kind of immersed in the New Age practices, do you remember going to mass during that and feeling this tension when you'd walk in, or
Mm,
what is that? Because
mm,
there was this video that came up the other day of these students. I don't even know where this was. They were protesting God knows what, but they came around this corner and there's a procession with a monstrance right there, and and they actually run away. And it made me think of the tension, the reality of the principalities battle that's happening.
yeah. That's really fascinating. I would be interested in reading more about that. But for me personally, I guess things kind of got started to go deeper in 2019, because I'm thinking like it got really intense in 2020, and that was during COVID. So I really wasn't going to church in 2020 at all. We didn't go to church for Easter that year because that was when COVID really hit. Um, but yeah, in 2019, I just had been to a psychic before, and I had been involved like using crystals, but it wasn't enough to like notice any tension. If anything, honestly, going to mass while I was in New Age, I felt more connected to God than I ever had before, because spirituality was always turned off for me. Like I really didn't know what we were doing there or what we were like believing. I just had no sense at all of like they say that the veil is thin between heaven and earth, and that the body of Christ is here and the saints are here with us. And I just had no conception of that. So getting into New Age actually is what really led me back to Catholicism, was finding that I could be in touch with God here. Um, but yeah, I think So yeah, there was nothing like that. I actually, so this is funny, ironic, I should say. Um, one on my quest to seek more and to become more enlightened, I ended up flying to Ecuador to go on a psychedelic retreat because after my ex broke up with me, I started leaning into psychedelics and I was having some very profound spiritual experiences with psychedelics, and um, I was using them to heal trauma. And I was using them to get in touch with my emotions and like just work through some anxiety. And yeah, every time I would take psychedelics, I was like learning more about myself and becoming more like at peace, I guess, with the world and with my life circumstances. Um, but when I went to Ecuador to go on that retreat, there's a special church nearby where it has a statue of Mary, Rosa Mystica, the Mystic Rose, and she had cried tears of blood. And this was a site where one of where that happened. So I remember one of the days at the retreat, I went to the Catholic Church to see just, I guess the lookout point is very beautiful there. So that was what pulled me in, was to see the lookout point. But it happened to be a site where the statue was there and there was tears of blood. So that was really cool. I mean, like, so I was deep in that was the deepest that I was ever in with like the demonic and with these spiritual practices. So I was able to go to the church and everything was fine. So yeah, but I really believe that I was protected throughout that experience. Um, that there was something, I don't know why, but there was a night where they call it medicine that I was drinking. It's called ayahuasca. And I was Yeah, it's a drug that comes from the root of a tree within the Amazon forest.
Okay.
So so a lot of natives use it, native tribes in Latin America. Um, so they call it medicine, and I had drinking like three little cups of the medicine, like a NyQuil shot, and I went up to the shaman, who was a woman who was pregnant, and I said to her, like, I'm not feeling anything. And she said, oh, like sometimes your mind doesn't allow you to connect. So the next day, I we had another ceremony and I drank the medicine again. And that's when I was able to kind of have a profound experience. But um I don't know why. I still wonder why it was just me who didn't have any connection the first night, or side effects, I guess, the first night. So that always confused me. But Jesus was definitely working. And it was because the third night we did a mushroom ceremony with psychedelics. And I was talking with the shaman, and we were talking about just really because COVID woke me up with some of just like the polarization happening in our country. It really just woke me up, and I started realizing that my entire life I'd been programmed by like Marxist ideology, thinking about like the oppressed and the oppressor, and just feeling like Americans, we just feel like we're always being oppressed. And then that creates this like anger, and we want someone to blame always. And we see it that typically they want to blame white males. But so I was really leaning into all of that and believing all of that and becoming really angry about it as well. And I just don't believe that anymore. I don't believe that narrative. But I realized that there was a narrative because of COVID. So that's what kind of woke me up to realizing that something was off in our society. And like, it's not healthy, whatever's going on. I was calling myself like a social justice warrior. And yeah, and all of this virtue signaling that's going on. So I just woke up to all of that around this time. So that's what I was talking to the shaman about. And she says to me, like, Megan, when God sent his son down to earth, um, and then she kept talking, but I didn't listen to anything else she said because I was just shocked that a shaman was telling me that God sent his son to earth. Um, and I was like, wait, are you saying that Jesus is divine, that he's the son of God? Because at that point, I had believed that Jesus was a prophet, just like Mohammed was a prophet and Buddha was enlightened. So I was just really thinking that all of the religions were true, and that Jesus was just enlightened and had special connection with God. That's where New Age was leading me.
Were there
But
books that said that, or you were just piecing things together and saying this has got to be, you know?
yeah, they call it omnism, is the belief that all religions are true.
Okay.
So I was calling myself an omnist at that point. But it's just so funny how when you get so into that mindset that you believe that you can just like label yourself however you want, like me labeling myself as an atheist and then an omnist and then just a new age like spiritual person, spiritual not religious.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's just funny how all of these labels just shift and change, and it's all just up to you to decide, and it's just not true.
And is that not part of chasing a high a little bit? Is because you're going to garner more attention if you can change, what you stand for, and if it's
Perhaps. I don't
mutable.
know.
I think maybe I'm thinking of a few people that might do that in order
Mm,
to get more, you know.
yeah. Well, I think honestly it took a lot of humility for me to pedal back on my words and say like, oh, never mind, I'm not an atheist anymore. I actually believe this now. Like, because I was very vocal on my Instagram stories,
Sure.
and I was trying to like help other people wake up. Um, so I tried to wake people up to atheism, and then I tried to wake people up to New Age, and I tried to wake people up to COVID. So people just are seeing me go through all these shifts, and yeah, I mean it loses credibility when you're like calling yourself all of these different labels.
Got
It's
it.
like, oh, that girl actually is confused.
That's a
Yeah.
that's that's a really good point. So what I'm trying to understand is you got this shaman in Ecuador who is talking about the Son of God. Um, what is the purpose of the shaman in that village, in that for that retreat, right? That person was connected to the retreat, right? And everyone's trying
Yeah.
to connect. What are they trying to connect with? Is it all? I would love for you to maybe summarize what happened there.
Okay. Yeah, so the place that I went to was like a small little retreat hotel, like a five-star hotel, and it's ran out of the home of a husband and wife. And typically the husband is the one who directs all of the ceremonies and the retreats, but he was taking off this this retreat. So he let his wife be the one who was leading. But she is essentially the medicine woman. She's in charge of the dosages and the prayers. So what we did was we had a schedule about like which ceremonies were when, and she was essentially leading all of the ceremonies, and she would say prayers, and she didn't speak English. So which was cool for me because I speak Spanish. So I was able to talk with her, and that kind of created another connection between me and her. Um, but um, so she had grown up using this medicine with her grandfather, who was a shaman. So she just had all of these prayers and chants and songs that she would sing. Like she would like blow on the medicine and do like, I don't know, it was all very native. Like they were native practices being used. So
But I mean, when they're marketing this for you to even know about it, what is the promise attached?
mm, yes, yeah, okay. So with ayahuasca, um the promise is that you will learn information about yourself.
Okay,
So it is about like healing and self-reflection and just getting insights. But the draw to it is that, yeah, that you will get a new perspective, that you will leave there seeing the world through a different lens. So people who are hurting, people who are angry all the time or having issues or recovering from a heartbreak, like these are people who are interested in coming to these retreats. Um, yeah.
got it. Okay. So then how long were you there for the retreat?
It was a 10-day retreat,
Okay. So then when you
but
return, go ahead, go ahead.
the reason why I was going to Ecuador was to do a internship just to learn Spanish. I mean, to practice my Spanish more and become more developed there. So I got hired at like a Spanish school, working as a secretary, but then I was able to take classes for free. So the internship idea actually came first, and then I wondered if there was a ayahuasca retreat nearby, and there was just 10 minutes down the road. So I ended up doing the retreat first, and then I started my internship after.
Got it. So how long was the internship? Were you in Ecuador for what, 6 months?
Yeah, well, it was just over the summer, so the internship was supposed to be 8 weeks,
Mhm.
but the last day of the retreat, they warned everyone, and they said that you need to be careful because your like body and your soul has been opened up, and like you're very vulnerable right now. So you just want to like take it slow and be like safe. Like they kind of said, don't go to bars and like don't go out partying, don't drink alcohol. And because where I was staying, where my internship was a party town. And it was just, it's really not it wasn't a good space for me to be. Um, and it kind of has some like second world country um development. So like it's just not, it's not, it wasn't what I was used to as an American. I didn't have the same comforts. So after leaving a 5-star resort and then going into Ecuador in a just underdeveloped place. So I was really spiritually, mentally, emotionally disturbed. So I was supposed to be there for 8 weeks, but I ended up just like one day I just couldn't handle it anymore. And I just booked a flight that same day. And I just booked it out of Ecuador because I was so disturbed there.
Wow. So these shaman, I'm back to that. How would they classify their religion? How would they classify their relationship with a single God, or would they? I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. No, they kind of adopt this, they take a new form of like the body of Christ mentality. So believing that you can like, they do believe in one God, that there is one source, one creator. And but they also, I mean, I guess it's a little bit pagan at the same time because I mean they believe that there's one source, a leader, I guess, of all these other spirits, but they also believe in like that other spirits are in control of other parts of the world, like there was a Mother Nature, and that like the mushroom spirits were children, is what the shaman said. Like spirits of mushrooms were children spirits, and the spirit of ayahuasca was a grandmother spirit. So
What?
like,
Okay.
yeah, so it was like you're like drinking and consuming in these spirits and inviting them into your body to then show you things and reveal things to you.
Got it. So it's like a family in nature, in a sense. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
so interested in how that all came
Yeah.
about, and
And
I
they,
also understand the differences in cultures and how they came about to believe some of these things.
yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
so I guess it is pagan because it comes from these Native American practices. Um, but I don't know. I mean, I know that they also believe that there's one God ahead of everything else. So it's confusing.
That is, yeah. So then you return on that flight to the States. You had that
Yeah.
experience with
Yeah.
the Catholic
And
Church.
I had not, and I did not pair, I did not make the connection that I didn't make the connection that the reason why I was so disturbed was because of the psychedelic retreat. I thought that I was going through culture shock. Um, and I just couldn't handle it because I thought my living conditions were just um too camper style for me. Like it was roughing it and I didn't like it, like with cold showers and all of that. So I think it was just a mix of both, like a mix of culture shock and then a mix of just the spiritual like warfare that I had just gone through and opened myself up to. So on my way out of Ecuador, I actually met somebody who offered to drive me to the airport and said that he said that like the taxi drivers in Ecuador take advantage of Americans. So he offered me a ride to the airport. So I went with him and we went out to eat before because I had some time before my flight. And he was my age, like, and he was Catholic. So I was telling him about my experience and he was like very open-minded to it. And I was like, oh, like this guy is Catholic and he doesn't seem like judgmental or um I don't know, like weird in any way. So I ended up staying in touch with him. So when I got back to the States, I it ended up inviting him to come stay with me um, later in September. So 2 months later, he came to visit me. But before that, actually, when I got back to the States, it took a while for me to detach from psychedelics. I was, I guess, addicted to the high of the enlightenment, of like the insight that I would get. That became just like my interest in getting information. So I continued with psychedelics. And there was a night at the end of July of 2021, and I just got convicted by God. Like I was in some really dark, deep sin. Like at that point, for the past 2 years, I had been shoplifting, I had been stealing. I didn't pay for my groceries for like 2 years. Um, I was just lying and I was just not a good person. And in that moment, um, I was by myself and I had taken psychedelics and I ended up bringing a little crucifix with me when I went and I went out like into the woods and just like was sitting there and just trying to connect, I guess, with God. And that's when I just felt like the voice so clear, just saying like, it's time to change. Like, you can't live like this anymore. And I was like, what? Who is saying this? Like, it was just the most intense experience. But yeah, there's no doubt that it was the voice of the Holy Spirit, just, shepherding me and saying like, we're not going to be doing this anymore. I'm going to show you the new way how to live. And yeah, after that, that kind of entered my journey into Catholicism. So when my friend from Ecuador came to visit me, he was the one who inspired me to go back to Mass. So I went back to my first Mass with him, and he didn't receive communion. And I asked him, why didn't you go up? Like, I thought you were Catholic. Why didn't you go receive? And he said, well, it's because I'm in a state of sin. And I was like, well, what's that? And he said, yeah, like I missed church last week, and I can't receive communion because I'm in a state of sin and I have to go to confession. And this was all foreign to me. I was just shocked. And I was like, what? Well, I just received and I just didn't understand. So immediately I'm like, oh, well, I need to go to confession too then, because I don't want to be receiving the Eucharist. Like, if you're not receiving the Eucharist because you missed church last week, then I really shouldn't be receiving the Eucharist. So I ended up going back to confession that week after 12 years. Yeah. And it was just been like, honestly, a grace ride ever since. Like, grace has just been flowing out at me. And I'm just totally in love with God and Catholicism. And yeah, things got really intense.
That's beautiful. So I've heard this from different people about they could be stoned, they could be drunk. In your case, you're high. I don't know how high, but when God wants to enter a person's life, and it's unbelievable, unbelievable.
I know. Yeah, they say, like God can work through anything, and he did. So that's why I'm really strong now about saying like psychedelics are not the way to encounter God. And he showed me that very clearly, that this is not what you should be doing. So I always fear that someone will hear my story and think that, oh, like I need to go on a psychedelic retreat, or I need to go start taking psychedelics to heal my trauma, or just like to get in touch with my spiritual side. And that is just that's a lie. That would be a temptation of the
Absolutely.
enemy just trying to work there.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, find a monastery that has a retreat, a silent retreat,
Yes.
and get
Yeah.
what you yearn for, get from the sacraments. That's why they're there to
Right.
that you when you learn to examine yourself. There's so many there's so much depth to the Catholic faith that it's funny. We always look for counterfeits out there and chase counterfeits. And some people, their entire lives are just based on chasing, looking for grace, and certainly not
Yeah.
able to name it. Uh,
Yeah.
just looking for all these answers. And like you said from the beginning, there's this if you have some sense of control, that's the other thing I was going to ask you about. What's the element of, is there a discussion of sacrifice as it relates to your personal journey? So, for instance, when you're in New Age, is there any talk about you giving up something? Because you're talking about control. Where's the element of giving up things and carrying? Again, they wouldn't say carrying your cross, but where is that in?
Yeah, there's there's the notion of radical acceptance. So there's talk about surrender and detachment,
Mm,
like surrender to the universe, and like just allow that this idea of whatever happens happens, and everything that happens is what is supposed to be. So so yeah, it's just that idea of clutch to your peace. Don't let anything disturb your peace. And if you can master your peace, then nothing will harm you. So that's like, it's not about like, oh, this suffering happened, and this is why. This is why it's happening. There's really no answer why. It's just this is the way life is, this is the way the world is.
Fine.
So if you want peace, then you have to accept it.
Got it. Now, does that also include, okay, if there's a relationship that's not going well, that whatever it takes, you got to do you, as I've heard many times.
Hmm.
That an element as well, where it's like you got to find your peace. So in other words, you matter more than anyone else.
Yeah, I think there is elements of that, but at the same time, I noticed that there's a lot of love in these communities where they truly do want to treat everyone like a brother and a sister
Mhm.
in the very hippie sense. Um, so I don't know. I think there's the notion of that where like you're just affirming everyone then because you just want everyone to follow and do what they want. So then yeah, there's this thing like if you were a new age couple and you were very like into your hippiness, and the husband said like, hey, this isn't working for me anymore. Um, I don't feel like I'm being called to this relationship anymore. Then in that mentality, the wife would say, okay, yes, you have to do what you feel is best. And I trust that you're listening to your higher self.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, there's just that radical acceptance of like, yeah, like you can have multiple partners throughout your lifetime and um, people come into your life through seasons and people exit your life for seasons and that's all okay and everything's fine
Mhm. Yeah,
no matter how badly it hurts.
yeah, I remember someone that had told me that they were spiritual, not religious, and definitely they were speaking much like you were in the past, you know. And I said, "Oh, how's your?" I guess he was dating someone, and he just said, "Well, it didn't work out. Ultimately, I had to be at." He said something just like what you said. He said, "I have to be at peace," and I told her this is my spiritual journey, and she accepted it. Much like you just said, it was very odd to me. I'd never heard anything like that because
Hmm.
before that he had said that he wanted to propose, so that's why it just
Hmm.
threw me off. He just realized he needed to do something else, and he didn't
Wow.
refer to a call from God, of course. He just said something like, I feel that, man, what was the term? It was really odd to me. It was like there's strata in the sky or something. He said something
Uh-huh.
up here. It really
Wow.
confused me, but yeah. Um,
Yeah, it's really disturbing because it doesn't work out and it's not the pretty picture that people want to paint because there's a lot of damage there, like a lot of pain. Um, and it's just, I think it just really confuses people. And then they have no philosophy or framework to go off of. Like we as Catholics, we have the framework of the cross. And if you don't have that, then suffering can just become the darkest cloud and just you just don't understand it and it can send people into like a form of insanity just not understanding why they have to suffer and not being able to make any sense of it.
got it.
Yeah, that can just be sad, I think.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, it was probably one of the first things you said, was public school. Can you speak to what you meant by that and what happened? What transpired there that is, I guess,
Yeah.
so common?
Yeah, well, I remember I had thought about my testimony ahead of time. Like, I would love to write a book one day, um, multiple books maybe. And one book, especially, I want to write for middle schoolers about like the public school secular experience, and that, just speaking to chastity in a way that could be received by secular kids. Um, but I don't want to blame public school because I think although I think public school is a toxic environment for children, um, I I think parenting is a huge factor. Like, I think a good set of Catholic parents could send their child to public school and that child could come out being a strong Catholic. It just depends on what's going on outside of school.
Sure.
Um, but I mean, that it also should be noted that public school is really dangerous for a kid, especially with teachers um, promoting ideas or just like, having kids, forcing kids to choose their pronouns and things like that at in kindergarten. It just can become a confusing place, and you just want to go along with the crowd because as a kid and going through your teen years, like you just want to be liked. And that is just such a theme throughout all elementary years, is that you just want to fit in and you want to be liked. So I remember when I was in school, being prude was like the biggest insult. Um, if you were a girl who was prude, then nobody wanted to hang out with you,
Mhm.
and people would make fun of you. And it's just so twisted, thinking about that now, and it makes me so sad for all the girls.
It's true. The virtues are mocked, and so why would you pursue that? And then also this idea of needing acceptance at that age, it's such a delicate thing because you hear about the high rate of suicide when someone doesn't get that, or they thought they had it and then someone rejects them horribly. They don't even know, they spiral. I mean, I've read some of these stories, and it's incredibly
Yeah,
sad. And they, because they were getting
yeah,
a lot of their identity from social media, and keeping up with the trends, the trends that change every week, every day. You,
yeah, yeah, right. It's got to be hard for kids. And then I think now, like, also I went to Catholic school from kindergarten through sixth grade. So it was middle school when I started public school. But that's also the time when people started to become sexually involved
yeah.
or sexually active. So I I don't think that my Catholic school taught us theology of the body in 2005. Um, but I think theology of the body would have been really helpful. Um, in those elementary school years, in the formative years. Because I think, yeah, it would have taught me dignity about my body and just who I am as a girl, as a woman.
Mhm.
So, so yeah, I think about that a lot, about how theology of the body can impact like the schools, because Catholic schools can also just be places where the kids are sexually active and they almost feel like they get a high from the rebellion of it. Just like, haha, we're Catholic and look at
Yeah.
us, what we do on weekends.
Well, I remember my wife said growing up, she didn't go to a Catholic high school, but she knew of this Catholic high school, and she said that's known for parties. Back in the day, that's where everyone knew the biggest parties were going to be. They were
Mm,
associated
hmm.
with Catholic school. I thought, well, that's exactly what the founders were hoping for. I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think I personally, for me, my dream would be to like join a homeschool co-op and kind of homeschool my neighborhood or something like that. Um,
Or
yeah,
even be
I
the
think,
one that teaches theology of the body, right? They have.
yeah, yeah, I would love that. So, that would be ideal. But there's that question of, do you shelter your kids from the world or do you allow them in the world? Like, I think about phones and I think there's no way my children will have access to social media until they're 18. But I don't know,
That's
it
the
gets
question that
confusing.
every parent asks themselves. How much of this
Yeah.
is you want them to be strong? Um, so the other theory is, kind of just immerse them and it will all work out, which I cannot get behind, because if you somehow assume that it's all going to work out based on what? Like, there are souls that perish. We know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. When I'm talking with people, because when I first came back to the church, things got really intense just for me with scrupulosity and just, I mean, when I was first coming back to Jesus, I wasn't sure if Catholicism was the truth. So I was looking into just like what the Protestants say. And they say that the Catholic Church is like a cult and it's demonic. So I was afraid about like what I was getting into. But I ended up discovering that Catholicism was true. And then I wanted everyone else to know it. So I don't know, I started to become a bit like legalistic as a new Catholic. And I wanted everyone to know, like, oh, well, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. We have to do this. We have to pray the rosary every day. And just like it was scrupulosity and it was really unhealthy and it was turning people off from Catholicism. Um, so
yeah, it becomes more. I just had a men's group last night, and we were talking about that. The outside world starts to view you. They may not know a lot about the Bible, but you start to look like a Pharisee. And they're
yeah,
saying, where's that welcoming message? Where's the love of neighbor? Have you forgotten that? You're talking about these prescribed things. And
hmm,
what if I need spiritual? What if I'm just, maybe I need a drink from the bottle? In other words, is what I'm trying to say. And you're throwing these really lofty things at me and saying it's a requirement. Well, you're kind of tone deaf to uh, the fact that many, many, many people out there are not on the same journey. So there is a
yeah.
place where you don't have to affirm things that are contrary to Catholic teaching, but you have to be shrewd about how you approach these things.
Exactly. Yeah. So I had I had to learn that the hard way, and I'm still learning it in like it's difficult to learn to I'm trying to grow in compassion in the sense of like meeting people where they're at. And yeah, I don't want to force my Catholicism down anyone, like down anyone's throat. So I don't know. I'm learning how to do that with grace. Yeah.
Well said. Anything else you wanted to touch on? Because again, what strikes me about your journey is the fact that you had all these. Um, I think of the retreat, of course, but beneath that, the desire to reach for something, and then God enters your life. I don't know if you can address that again, maybe
Yeah.
just summarize.
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of the time people think that they're looking for happiness, but we know that happiness is fleeting. So I think that most people are looking for peace and searching for like a constant peace. And sorry, I don't know if you can hear my cat in the background,
No,
but he's okay, good. Um, but yeah, so I was on this peace quest and I've discovered that um, peace really comes through humility and gratitude. So, I mean, that's just my takeaway after this entire journey is trying to find peace and trying to just stay with the truth because I wanted the truth because I wanted peace. So, yeah, I've been finding that through humility and gratitude. So that's like the wisdom I want to share with others. But then also there's the topic of mercy, which has just been so constant throughout my entire journey. I've just been granted so much undeserved mercy, and it's just a testament. Um, I'm getting emotional, but it's just a testament to like the love of Jesus and the Sacred Heart.
so good. And when we went down some of those tangents, and this happens with other guests, sometimes you say, well, why belabor the point? Well, there are people that find these videos And it matters because you can go all the way into that emotional aspect of the journey, and you never know who's doing these. I've never even heard, I had not heard of the psychedelic retreats, but I'm sure they're blowing up. I'm sure
Yeah.
there are tons of them.
Yeah. A lot of privileged people in America are going and flying out to go on these retreats.
Got it. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, no, your witness is tremendous, and the fact that you're willing to talk about it so openly does also attest to the fact that God has worked on you tremendously. Because there's also the element, people go through this period of shame, and why talk about that? And then I would always say, talk about it. There are people that are saying they don't even realize it. I wish someone would talk about this.
Hmm.
So yeah, God bless.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all of that.
Thank
Was
you.
there something else you were going to say? Go ahead.
Yes. Just to say also, like, one of the things that was major through my story was that I was pro-choice for the longest time because of my abortion. And I was very vocally pro-choice. And it wasn't until like that psychedelic retreat where I understood the value of life and like the gift of human life and just how beautiful life is. And that's when it really hit me, when I realized what had happened. And I felt betrayed. I felt betrayed by the lies.
Wow. Very important point, that in the midst of all of that, you're learning about the importance of life among all the confusion. So, um,
Yeah, so it's just so yeah, I just see a lot of people now like they want to be like they want to be fighting for humanity and they think like we need to fight for the rights of humans and we need to fight for the rights of women. But it's betrayal because abortion hurts women. So,
well said. Well said.
yeah.
Well, thanks again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel like yeah, we went a lot into New Age, but I feel like we were able to touch on all the important things that are just like shining through right now in my present life. So
Absolutely. Well, thanks
yeah,
again. And everyone, please share this. Again, it's the 100th episode. I will probably never say this again about promotion, but get it out there. Share the video. Write to Megan. God bless you all. Take care.